I wanted to wrap up today by talking a little bit about the real estate outlook in Houston. I get asked this all the time as a business professor and as a real estate professional. And frankly, the outlook 1 year after Hurricane Harvey is frankly a pretty good-looking outlook. And single-family house prices are the median price is up to $245,000. The average price is up 4.3% to $316,000 and change. So housing, as we all know, in the greater Houston area is getting more expensive. Not surprisingly, parallel to that is the rental cost for single-family homes. The average rent for a single-family home increased almost 4% to just under $1,900 a month. And the average rent for townhomes and condos rose 6.7% to about $1,660 a month. So these are very significant numbers. Now, paired with these numbers, as we mentioned, the increased cost of housing, what I thought was especially interesting is despite the increase in price in single-family homes, a big increase, that actually the rental activity for townhomes and condominiums went down. This is a very important caution flag, I think, for investors buying in the greater Houston area. The greater Houston area is not New York. It is not Boston. It is not Washington. We have a lot of people who've come here from other parts of the country. Houston historically has not been kind to townhouses and condominiums. As I mentioned, the house that flooded was in Alexandria, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C. And the townhouse and condo market there is fantastic. Houston is in a massive building boom, building very substantial high-rise structures. These are either going to rent or sell at very high prices. I'm seeing condo prices in the Greater Heights area, $600,000 and $700,000 for a rebuild of an old building, and I mean an old building, and not a particularly pretty one. But my concern is with the extensive activity that we're seeing, is that in the very high prices for these units, and certainly the investors, in order to acquire a solid city block in a close-in neighborhood and then build a high-rise structure on it, you're talking a massive capital investment that they're going to be looking to recover. That I am concerned that we're doing what Houston has clinically or chronically done, which is to overbuild in that particular segment of the market, and again, a segment of the market that historically has not been a strong market in the greater Houston area. May or may not be true. Maybe we've changed, and maybe condominiums are going to be in everybody's future in the Houston area, in the rapidly gentrifying inner city district, say around the ballpark and places like that. But I think people as investors really need to be cautious if they're buying a condominium or a townhouse as an investment. I have some friends that about 12 years ago, when the high-rise condominium boom first started, they had some money to work with, and they purchased 2 units in one of the early, very nice, very well-located condominium developments. And they are very happy. They live in 1 unit, and they've been very happy with that unit. But they struggled to keep the other unit rented, the one they bought as an investment, and I think eventually let it go for years later, let it go very close to what they had paid for it, if not a slight loss. So again, a word to the wise is that I really think that depending on where the properties are located and what the pricing is, that people, I think single family, small developments are still very attractive rental properties and easy to purchase by individual investors, small firm investors. But some of these condominiums can be a little scary. One of the things I see is the classic housing cycle. Young professional will rent an apartment, and then buy a condo, and then buy a house or buy a townhouse, and keep the condo and rent it out. Usually their cost basis in these properties is relatively low, and they can keep them rented, and they don't need a whole lot of help to keep them rented, and not the world's easiest deal, but they're usually not making any great money. But if you're coming into these new condominium complexes with very substantial front money purchase, where just the holding costs are going to be very substantial, I think that people really need to take a hard look at that market to see if they're going to rent easily for what will be required to cover the note. And again, the mortgage rates are up significantly over the last several years. So it's people need to factor in increased cost of insurance, rising mortgage rates, and we haven't talked about taxes, but real estate taxes, of course, in Texas are very high, even relative to what are called high-price markets like California and New York. We're right up there when it comes to high property taxes. And again, landlords need to anticipate that and make sure that their property will rent to cover these costs. I had a discussion in the last couple days with a person talking about buying an office for themselves for their law practice, and then to have additional office space to rent out. And one of the things I reminded them was that if you are going to be a landlord, that you need to have the financial wherewithal to survive a significant event. In my case, my property on Heights Boulevard, which produced significant rental income, was down for 2 years. And during that time, I paid the utilities, I paid the real estate taxes, I paid the insurance, and the mortgage. And you've got to be deep enough to be able to cover that in the event of a significant loss. I also recommend to anyone considering investing that they figure that the property will not break even for at least 1 year and sometimes 2 years, depending on how much is put down, how hot that particular rental market is, and stuff like that.